Entering CPSA registered competitions. This video is specifically for the English sporting discipline. However, other disciplines do work in a similar manner to those of squadded events that I will come on to shortly. You don't actually have to be registered with the CPSA to enter their competitions, but it does help, and there are certain benefits if you are registered with them, which I will link to in another video. So there are two different types of event. One is a squadded and the other is a non-squadded. If you are entering a squadded event, you will be given a certain time where you will start shooting, so you need to make sure that you're ready and generally meet at the first stand for the time given. So for example, you will pre-book either by phone or potentially on the website. You'll get your start time and then the squad will meet and shoot from there. The second type is a non-squadded event, and that is where you just turn up and shoot if you feel like it on the day. Another difference between the squadded and non-squadded events are if you are entering a non-squadded event, then you are personally responsible for your scorecard. So when you register, you will be handed your scorecard, and then you take that round and present it at each stand to the referee on that stand. They will then score your card appropriately and also register your score on their own personal score sheet against your scorecard number. If you are on a squadded event, then there are two different ways that works. The most common is that the referee will go around with you on each stand and they will have control of your scorecards. Or alternatively, I have been on one or two where we have been presented with the score sheet with all 6 people on of the squad, and then somebody has been responsible for that score sheet for the rest of the shoot. Now, if you are on a non-squadded event, you must hand your scorecard in at the end of the event. If you aren't registered with the CPSA, then you can only enter the competitions as what they call birds only, or giving it its official title, targets only. However, if you are CPSA registered, then you get the option of either entering as targets only or the competition proper, in which case you are then entitled to any prize money if you do well and get to a certain prize winning position within the competition. Now that can be either within your certain class or the high gun if you are good enough. So again, it is well worth considering joining the CPSA purely for that reason. If you aren't a CPSA member and you have to enter just as birds only or targets only, you cannot expect to win any money at all, unfortunately. However, you will save yourself generally about £5 on each competition, because to enter as birds only is usually cheaper, because obviously you're not contributing to the prize money. Later on you will see that I will show in the scores for a certain event that some people do enter as competition and others enter as targets only, and that will become apparent later. On CPSA English sporting competitions, there are 4 types of targets. The first and the most common is the on report, which is where you have an A bird that is released when you call pull, and then when you shoot at that target, the referee will release the B bird. The next most popular is the sim pair, or simultaneous, or SIMO, known as a true pair in America. That is obviously a pair of targets released at the same time. Now the next two aren't very common, but they are something that you need to be aware of. The first is a following pair, or Raphael. That is a pair of targets, but it's released from one trap. So you'll call pull, the ref will release the first target. Now it is a little bit different to an on report pair, because the second target can be released as soon as the trap is reset and loaded the next clay. So it isn't necessarily when you actually shoot the first target. the ref can release the second target before you've even hit the first one. So something to be aware of on that one. And then finally is the full use single. This you will normally find is either a big teal, a big crow, or a batu. Say it's something along the lines of about 60 yards. So make sure you've got enough cartridges for that type of target. And as it's known, a full use single, there is only one target, so it's only one clay released, and you have full use of the gun, so that means you can shoot both barrels at it. Finally, on the subject of targets is the stands and the amount of pairs within each stand. Obviously the vast majority of shoots are for 100 birders. There are some that are 70 quite often, but the vast majority are 100 targets. And for the vast majority of stands, they consist of 4 pairs of targets. Now 4 pairs is obviously 8, and 8 doesn't go into 100. So you will often find that there are some stands that may have 3 pairs, or some stands that may have 5 pairs of targets, as shown on this scorecard, where you can see stand 7 and stand 10 both have 5 pairs of targets. Generally you will find that there are 12 stands, but then you may find that there are 12 stands of 4 pairs and then one stand which has 4 full use singles to make it up to the 100 bird targets. If you are doing a non-squadded event, then this is something to consider, which is approaching the stand. Now, whilst you don't have to be completely silent, obviously it's good manners not to cause too much of a distraction to the shooter or the referee. And again, when you're approaching the stand with your scorecard to give the ref your scorecard, please don't distract either him or her or the shooter in the stand. Then make sure that you are ready to shoot. You've got your cartridges, plenty of cartridges in your pocket or your cartridge bag, so that you don't have to stop and grab some more. Another one that you really need to be aware of is that very few referees announce the next shooter. So please be aware of where you are in a queue. It isn't uncommon to be behind, say, 10 or 15 people. Unfortunately, it does happen sometimes, so get a good feel for who's in front of you and when you are shooting next. Once again, very few referees tell you when you're next. If you are first on a stand, or if you arrive at a stand where nobody is actually shooting, so you don't get the chance to see the targets, you have the opportunity to view the targets without actually shooting at them, otherwise known as a show pair. The referee should give you a brief description of the targets that are set, and let's assume that it's an on-report pair. You will stand with your gun unloaded in a safe manner, and then, as if you were going to shoot them, you would call pull to see the A bird, and then as you haven't got a gun to shoot at that bird, you will then say bang to simulate you shooting at that first target. The referee will then release the B bird for you to see that as well. If it's a simultaneous pair, you have the opportunity to see the pair of targets again, but not on an on-report pair. So scoring and no birds. There isn't actually a generic or specific way for the referees to announce whether you have hit or missed the target. They each have their own individual ways. Quite a few, if you hit the pair, won't say anything. So if they don't say anything, just assume that they have recorded that you've hit the pair. Some will say hit and miss. Others will say killed and lost. Others will say 1 and 0. So it's just something to get used to, but bear in mind, like I said, if they don't say anything, then you've probably hit the pair and that's how it's been recorded. And then no birds. these vary on the different targets. For an on-report pair, the first bird is established if the B bird is a no bird. So say for example you call pull, you hit the target, and then the B bird is a no bird. The A will be recorded as a hit. Then when you shoot the pair again, even if you miss the first A bird, that is still recorded as a hit. So one to consider there, the first bird is established on an on-report pair. However, on a simultaneous pair, the first bird isn't established and it's a pair again. Even if you hit the first one, then it's not established, and then vice versa. If you miss it on the first pair and then hit it on the second pair, it will be a hit. Before we get on to the shoot proper, one final bit of advice is if you haven't been to the ground that you intend to shoot at before, I would possibly consider going a couple of weeks beforehand at, say, the previous shoot to which you intend to shoot at, as they are generally every 2 weeks. So let's say there's one this Sunday. I would go and just have a look round, get a feel for the ground, perhaps speak to a few people, just give you a little bit of an insight before you actually go and shoot it for yourself in a couple of weeks' time. Now let's get on to preparing for the shoot itself. Okay, cartridges. Now most people have their cartridge of choice, but what I would say is if you do just shoot what I would consider a club cartridge, such as the Ely Select or Lyle Vale's English Sporter, whilst there's nothing wrong with those cartridges at all, I would consider upgrading to, say, the Lyle Vale Power Gold or Ely Olympic Blues at least. Now, whilst these are fibre wad, which I will be using at my local shoot just for a practice, I would suggest also, if they are allowed, to go to plastic wad if you aren't environmentally concerned. Now, with these in a plastic wad, at least you should be getting one of two things. That's a better recoil from a slightly better wad design, or alternatively, and hopefully as well, a better quality shot. And those things might just make a slight difference to your score, giving you another 1 or 2 on the scorecard. So it could be worth just spending that little bit extra just for a slightly better cartridge. Now, along with the Power Gold, which I'm quite a fan of, and the Olympic Blues, if you're looking for another great priced cartridge, I would highly recommend the Game Ball Velocity, or the other one that I have used in the past, but unfortunately I use an MK38 and it has developed the pretty well known Fiocchi allergy with the firing pin. But if you can, seriously consider using the Fiocchi F Black as well, because they are a really good cartridge, and all of those that I've just recommended are plenty good enough for your first few shoots at least. Let's have a look at what to take on a registered competition. Firstly, you obviously need to dress for the weather. Perhaps look at some decent walking boots or wellies such as these. Next, clothing wise, try to keep thin layers and as least restrictive as possible so it doesn't affect your shooting. In cold and wet conditions, I like to take this shooting coat, and it just goes to show that you don't need to spend silly money, as this was only about £45 from memory. Just to show you the label in case you are interested, it's HSF, and a proper shooting coat, and it does come with 4 cartridge pockets, as you can see there. Next, in better conditions, I like to wear a proper skeet or shooting vest. Again, you don't need to spend silly money. You can get them from something like £40 upwards. This was about 60, I think. Moving on to my range bag now. As you can see, there's plenty of pockets and hidey holes for different things. This one on the end I use for my drink and a snack bar. Then, very importantly, PPE. Eye and ear protection is mandatory on CPSA events, and I highly recommend carrying a spare pair of both. So I've got the peeler lenses. As you can see, there's 3 different lenses in there, and I've got 2 sets of arms, so I've always got a spare. 3 different lenses are obviously for different light conditions. Then for ear protection, I use CFG guards. They are my main ones, but I also still carry my old pair of decibels, which are still custom, but you can do them at home, and they're only about £30 and they work pretty well as far as I'm concerned. Now I have got a cloth in the peeler lens boxes, but I do also carry just a few lens wipes just in case I need those. Hand warmers for the winter in between shoot stands, and a couple of plasters just in case you cut yourself, you never know. Then moving on to the other side, a pair of Mac wet gloves. These are really good, useful in the winter if it's cold and wet, or even in the summer if your barrels get hot. Just pop one on my left hand as I am right-handed to look like Michael Jackson, but at least your hand doesn't get hot when it's close to the barrel. Then, as you can see, there's various chokes in there, not that I change mine very often at all. Pair of tissues for the end of the day when you see your scorecard. Various tools just in case the stock comes loose. It hasn't happened, but you never know, and I prefer to be prepared. So there's a couple of screwdrivers in there. Also got my choke key if I do need to change chokes. Some grease, and I suffer with dry eyes, so I've got some eye drops in there as well. Then there is a stock bolt key just in case it does come loose, like I say, so I'm prepared for most eventualities. Shotgun certificate in another little pocket there, so that's really useful. Then moving on to the main area, whilst eye and ear protection is mandatory, head protection is also recommended. So my cap's there. Then next is a towel, and this does come with its own carabiner type clip to put onto your belt loop or your shooting vest if you have a loop on that. That's useful again if it's raining, to dry your hands, or in the summer if it's a little bit sweaty. Then moving on to cartridges. So 100 birds shoot. You need to take more than 100 cartridges. Unfortunately, no birds do happen, so don't run out of cartridges. Even if you only shoot 7.5s, take 5 boxes so you've got 125. Now I predominantly shoot B&P Legend size 8, which is an Italian size 8, so UK 7.5. I then also take a box of 7.5s, just in case there is a slightly more distant target. And then an 8.5 I occasionally take, depending on how I feel on the day, just in case there's something a little bit closer and just want a little bit more help mentally, so chuck a few more pellets at it. Obviously there's a few more pellets in an 8.5 than an 8. And then I always find it's a good idea, especially if you're going to a shoot that you're not used to, but I always just take a handful of 6.5s just in case there's one of the full use single targets. Sometimes if it's like a 60, maybe 70 yard target, I'll choose to use a 6.5 rather than the 7.5. Once again, a mental thing, but I'd like to have that choice. Okay, so I'm fed and watered now. I've just been unpaid and registered, and I've got my scorecard. So it's off to see how much of a good day or a bad day we get. Now, I'm shooting with a friend, so as in the squadded events, I will be swapping who shoots first with him on each stand. Now, funnily enough, on virtually every occasion that I've been to Westfield before, I've very often seen a few red kites or the occasional buzzard flying around, soaring overhead, often causing a distraction. But on this occasion, we saw something slightly different and a little bit bigger. Oh. Oh. Hold. 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 Okay, I'll just briefly go through my scorecard for the day. With hindsight, I think it was quite a tough shoot, but I could have performed better, as always. A few silly little errors that are expected of somebody of my standard. Just a couple of things to note. The ref on stand 7 did make a slight error at first. Fortunately, he did announce my score as being 6 at first, but I knew that I'd only missed the 1. And luckily, there were a few witnesses and they backed me up to say that I had only missed the 1. So he kindly and graciously corrected it as required. Stand 6, that was the rabbit. That was just a silly error on my behalf. I didn't read it quite correctly and actually shot over the top on the 1. Excuse me. Stand 2, the first one, I just didn't get the lead correct, but then found it and then just dropped the last shot on the stand. The one that really sticks out was stand 11. That was a quartering away looper, and I just couldn't find it, quite simply. So that was cost me 4 points. And then 10, as you may see in the video, it was a real testament to Steve's course setting. It was a real head scratcher. It was a simo pair of going away targets. Sometimes they crossed, sometimes they didn't. So it was a case of 3 questions in your head. Do I take the left one first? Do I take the right one first? Or do I wait and risk it and try and take the pair together? Because it was very often possible that they were crossing and you could get away with perhaps taking just the one shot on them. So full credit to Steve there. It was a really testing target and one to get your head into. So that was great. Even though I only scored 5, so I missed half of them, it was still the type of test that I really enjoy. And to sum up, like I say, 75, slightly disappointing, but when you have a hard course, it keeps you grounded and lets you know that you've still got some work to do to improve. So overall, reasonably happy. Right, let's have a look at the results from today then. So the high score was 93, which is an absolutely fantastic score on that course. So well done, Sean. If I break it down and have a look for B class to see where I ended up. It's quite a way down, unfortunately. So Matthew Powell won B class with a score of 86. Again, a brilliant score on that course. And there's me, 75. Now, what I tend to do, if I haven't had a great result, is I'll compare myself to the A-class shooters, which is where I want to be, and just to see how I would have done if I was in A-class. So let's have a look at those. So the top score in A-class was by Christopher Rees on 89. Let's just see where 75 would have got me. So we're middle table. As you can see, the lowest was 48, but then Neil obviously only shot 76 targets. So something happened there. Obviously didn't finish the course. Just going through who's in the A class. You know, there's a few 68s there. So I would have beaten them. So overall quite happy. And that makes me feel a little bit better that I wouldn't have embarrassed myself if I was in A class. So I'm happy with that. Now what we can do also is we can look at the stats. And this is an interesting bit of information on this particular day and the course and the competition. So there were a total of 142 competitors and the average score was 71. So at least I was above the average score by 4%. So again, not too bad, reasonably happy. So I can't really complain too much. A little bit disappointed, but just shows that there's room for improvement and keeps me grounded. And I know that I can get better. So that concludes this video on CPSA registered competitions. I sincerely hope that it has been useful for you and that it's made you want to try one. For More information on the shoots that Steve and his team at the Clay Shooting Company run at both Westfield, at Bourton-on-the-Water, and Garlands in Tamworth, please see their website as shown here, theclayshootingcompany.com. And as I mentioned earlier, if you fancy going to Bourton-on-the-Water, which is a lovely village, there's more information at bourtoninfo.com. And there really is some good stuff to do for the kids, especially. Model village, which is really good. A motoring and toy museum. That's the model village here. So there's definitely a few hours entertainment for the rest of the family whilst you go and have a good shoot. Also near, if you're a Clarkson's Farm fan, is the Hawkstone Brewery, and also Jeremy's Pub and the farm itself are only probably about half an hour away from Westfield, so you can include those in your day's tour as well. So I hope that has been helpful for you, and hopefully see you at a shoot soon. Thanks for watching.